My jealous mother-in-law tried to ruin our wedding by bringing the woman who once loved my husband, but my cold revenge left her speechless. Before I start, I just wanted to say that I'll obviously be using fake names here. My husband is Dean, 28, male, and my mother-in-law is Sandra, 52, female. I, 30, female, have been with Dean for 5 years, and we got engaged 6 months ago. This is my first serious relationship since college, and I knew that if I was ever to get married, it would definitely be to Dean. I haven't really dated a lot of guys. I only have 3 ex-boyfriends, 2 of them were flings from high school, and only one was a serious boyfriend in college. After that, I got really busy with work, so I wasn't able to meet people or go out on dates. I met Dean at work when I started at the company I was previously employed in. I worked there for a year, during which I fell in love and started dating him. Soon enough, I got a better offer from another company, and I decided to take it. I'm still working there, and I earn more than Dean, which he doesn't have a problem with and even appreciates. Sandra doesn't like that at all and has made it a point to tell me that I should look for a job that pays less so that it doesn't lead to ego clashes between me and Dean in the future. I think it's a pretty ridiculous thing to say, so I never paid her much mind. But once we got engaged, she started bugging me about a lot of other things as well. For example, she didn't like the fact that I was older than Dean. But literally, what am I supposed to do about that? It's not even like I'm a decade older, like her husband was. It's just 2 years, so it doesn't matter. She also doesn't like the fact that I dress in business casual clothes all the time and wants me to wear the pretty floral dresses that she and her friends prefer. Look, I have nothing against floral dresses, but the kind of clothes Sandra and her friends wear are very old-fashioned, and I don't like them. It's just not my personal style. She has a bunch of problems with me that she loves to pick at whenever we meet, but you get the drift. She just doesn't like me, never has, and never will, because obviously, she's a boy mom. You know the type, the ones who never receive the love they wanted from their husbands, so they start expecting that love from their son instead. That's the kind of mother she is. But, thankfully, Dean has never been a mama's boy, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. In fact, he himself has admitted that he finds his mother's behavior really strange sometimes and doesn't like it when she gets possessive. The only reason we've even put up with her so far is because Dean's dad passed away a couple of years ago, and she's been really lonely since. She literally has no family except her son. And any time they get into a fight, she starts to guilt trip him, and he fails to cut her off. I won't say that it's an ideal arrangement, but I get it, so I've also managed to stay quiet about things for the most part. Sandra and I have had our differences, but I know she's a lonely old lady, and I don't want her to suffer because of me. I'm not a pushover, but I'm also not completely heartless, and yes, maybe it's the guilt, but I'd managed to put up with her and her annoying behavior for a really long time. I'd ignored all the digs she'd take at me, and I'd rarely ever fight back. But I put my foot down a couple of months before the wedding when she tried to interfere in the planning, and Dean put a stop to it immediately as well. He told my mother-in-law that she wasn't a part of the wedding and she wasn't paying for the wedding either, so she had no say in the planning. She got into a really bad argument with him over that and said that he was picking me over her and that meant that he was going to abandon her soon enough as well. He did console her and reassure her that he wasn't going to leave her alone in her old age, but now he was getting married, and his future wife came first. He explained to her that she was in the wrong here and couldn't always expect royal treatment just because she was his mother. She would have to accept that I was equally important to him, if not more. She said that she understood back then, but I had my doubts, if I'm being honest. I turned out to be right as well because a few days ago, right after the ceremony, Sandra walked in with one of Dean's friends, ex-friend, to be more precise. Rio, 28, male, had been a really close friend of Dean growing up, but they'd had a massive fallout last year. And it happened to be over me. Rio used to come over often, and we'd go out on double dates with whoever he happened to be with at the time almost every other week. Dean and Rio were really close, so naturally, I also put in an effort to be friends with him. We happened to share a lot of the same interests as well, and we'd geek out over those common interests, but that was about it. I never considered him as anything more than a friend, but as it turns out, he most certainly did, and it came out in the worst possible way. I don't want to get into that right now since it's irrelevant to the story here. But all you guys need to know is that Rio and Dean almost got into a physical fight back then and haven't spoken ever since. So, Sandra showing up to our reception with him was nothing short of nasty. She knew exactly what had happened, and that was all the more reason for her to bring him by. It was so disgusting because not only was she doing this to hurt me, but she also didn't seem to give a damn about her own son's feelings either. We were scandalized to see him there, and so were most of our close friends, and they even offered to escort him out. But Sandra looked really smug with him in tow. I wasn't half as bothered by Rio's presence as Dean was, honestly, because I didn't care for Rio. I didn't like him, but Dean absolutely hated him, so I was trying to talk to him and make sure he didn't do anything crazy and we could deal with this without creating chaos. To my surprise, I realized that Dean didn't need my help with that at all. He got up to give a speech a few minutes after he saw Rio and his mother socializing with the other guests like it was no big deal, and I tried to stop him, but he told me to just trust him on this one, and so I did. I decided to let him do whatever he wanted to because, honestly, he'd earned it. Sandra had done something awful, but unfortunately, the one she'd wanted to hurt wasn't bothered much, but her own son was. Her plan was a huge misfire. She was about to realize it because as soon as Dean got hold of the mic, he started talking about how his mother had loved him more than what was necessary his entire life. I knew he was going to expose Sandra, and so I didn't say a word and let him continue. I didn't even care if we were causing a scene. It was our damn wedding, and we'd do whatever we wanted to. Anyway, Dean gave a speech about how his mom had always tried to outshine his girlfriends, and he was glad to have finally met a woman whom she could never shake, referring to me. He then talked about how his mother's standards in men had dropped considerably because, after his dad, she jumped straight to Rio, who was almost half her age. Dean's a really funny guy, so even while he was talking, it all sounded like he was performing a comedy routine, and everyone was laughing along as well, even though the things he was saying were pretty mean. I could see Sandra tearing up and Rio going red in the face in a corner, and finally, when Dean ended with a joke about Sandra wanting to catch the bouquet at her own son's wedding, and all our guests started laughing, she literally ran out while Rio walked out behind her. I don't think people even noticed that she'd left due to how embarrassed she was because they were too busy laughing. I was glad that my husband had chosen to deal with this in the best and most mature way, and I was so proud of him. I really think he should become a stand-up comedian because no other guy would be able to make a routine out of nothing on the spot like he'd done that day, and the jokes were all really funny as well, even though they were meant to be cruel. But his quick wit saved our wedding from turning into a dramatic showdown, which is definitely what Sandra had wanted it to be so that our wedding day would forever become about her and not us. Unfortunately for her, her stunt had failed, and she was nothing more than a blip in the proceedings at best. We were really proud of ourselves and have been riding that high for a while now. Some of our friends have managed to record some parts of it as well, and we do replay it from time to time to get a good laugh out of it. Not that we spend all our time as a married couple talking about Sandra and Rio, but it's hard to resist the temptation to talk crap about them. Sandra hadn't texted us after that whole incident, and we were so sure that after that, she'd never speak to us ever again, but unfortunately, she did. She texted both Dean and me this morning, demanding that we issue a public apology on all our socials for whatever had been said at our wedding because it was all really humiliating, and she wasn't going to stand this nonsense. She even threatened to take us to court for defamation if we didn't do what she said, which was laughable. There was no fame in the first place. What defamation is she even talking about? Besides, she's the one who showed up with a guy we hadn't invited, and she definitely didn't have the authority to bring whoever she pleased to a private event. She tried to insult us, we humiliated her, and it was completely fair. She's trying to play the age card and claiming that as an older woman, it was incredibly dehumanizing for her to hear her own son say such vile things about her in front of so many people. She tried to guilt trip me as well, saying that as a woman myself, I should be sorry that I let any of this happen at all while I sat back and watched. I don't know how any of this makes sense because to me, it just feels like she's playing the age card plus the woman card to excuse her actions. She knew very well what she was doing when she brought Rio to our wedding, so she shouldn't be so surprised that there were real consequences to her actions. Dean also doesn't believe that he has anything to be sorry about and says that just because she's his mother doesn't mean that she's absolved of every awful thing that she does. So, Ida for making a mockery out of my mother-in-law when she brought an unwanted guest with her to ruin our wedding? Hi there. I'd like to add something here since a lot of people have been asking what exactly had happened between Rio and Dean. I didn't talk about it because then the post would become even longer than it already was, and also because I really didn't think it was relevant. The point was that they'd had a nasty fight, and everyone who was close to us had known about it, but since you guys want to know, I'll share the specifics of the incident. Last year, on Dean's birthday, we invited a few of our close friends to celebrate, and Sandra had insisted on coming even though she'd known that it would mostly be just us and our friends. Even after being told no multiple times, she still showed up, and once she was there, it would be just too awkward to tell her to go away, so we let her stay. We were obviously all drinking and trying to have fun, and since my mother-in-law doesn't drink, she just sat in the corner and tried to talk to people but ended up being ignored by most people. Rio and his girlfriend at the time were also there, and they'd been dating for months, which was his longest relationship so far, and he seemed kind of serious about her too, so we were all giving them some space since they seemed really into each other. But Sandra somehow managed to get Rio's girlfriend to talk to her, and she was a really sweet girl, so she didn't mind talking either. Rio ended up hanging out with us instead. We were all pretty drunk, and for some reason, one of our friends suggested playing spin the bottle. I don't know why they did that, but everyone seemed really enthusiastic about it as well, even though I had to remind them several times that we weren't in high school, and most of us were in serious relationships. But the single folks in our friend circle were all drunk and out of control, so they were hyping the game up. Rio, knowing that his girlfriend would be distracted since she was talking to Sandra, decided to grab my hand and ask me to join the game so that we'd finally have an excuse to kiss. We were all very drunk, but even in that state, we knew that he crossed a line. He was laughing as if he'd said something funny, and I had to force him to let go of my hand. Everyone present had heard what he'd said loud and clear and was stunned. Dean was also quite shocked and didn't know what to say for a few minutes after that. It was only when Rio's girlfriend walked out of our house crying that we were all brought back to reality. Dean very politely asked Rio to leave because he didn't want to start a fight, and Dean is a lot bigger than him as well, so he could get seriously hurt if he had tried to fight him that day. But Rio refused to leave and actually shoved Dean, saying that he was sick of him taking away everything that he loved. I didn't know what he was talking about until later on when Dean told me that he was referring to an incident in college where this senior that Rio had a huge crush on had also decided to ask Dean out. He'd obviously said no out of respect for Rio, but I guess he still hadn't let that one go. They started arguing in front of everyone, and it was getting really heated when, once again, Rio decided to shove Dean, and this time it was much harder than the first. I could sense that Dean was about to lose his temper, and I decided to step in, even though I was not even half as strong as either of them, and it was a huge risk for me physically. But I was sure that Dean wouldn't hurt me in a million years, and this was my only bet to prevent a fight from breaking out, so I did what I had to do. It was really immature of him, and Rio was obviously in the wrong, but I couldn't control him, so I decided to intervene and drag Dean away from him. I was sure that he would have beaten the crap out of Rio that day had I not stopped him. But anyway, he did leave eventually, and it was an awful day since Dean lost the only friend he'd had since he was a child. None of our other friends had kept in touch with Rio after that, but for whatever reason, Sandra had decided to stay in touch with him. We didn't even find out that they'd been talking this entire time even after what had happened at the party. Sandra only admitted that she'd never cut him off a few days after the wedding. I guess she hadn't intended to let us know, but she'd slipped up. She'd even defended it, saying that Rio was like a second son to her, which is why she demanded that we post our apologies soon since we were literally making a mockery out of a mother-son relationship. It's really ironic that Sandra, of all people, thinks that we're the ones making a mockery out of the mother-son relationship since, as far as I'm concerned, pushing your own son aside just to humiliate your daughter-in-law is much worse than whatever we did. Anyway, we've obviously told her that we won't be apologizing to her at all, and she can do whatever she wants to. I'm over it, and so is Dean. We regret not cutting her out of our lives ages ago, and yeah, I know we should have, but it's not that easy to just cut a parent off. But Dean is doing it now, and I'm really proud of him. I hope she leaves the situation alone and stops bothering us. Yes, we've blocked her. We blocked her the day after our wedding itself, but she's been using all her friends' accounts and numbers, and we can't keep track of it all, so we just keep blocking the accounts as the messages come. It's been close to 2 weeks, and she still hasn't dropped the topic. It's honestly getting on my nerves at this point because Dean and I are supposed to leave for our honeymoon in a week, and if this continues, we won't be able to enjoy our honeymoon to the fullest. The silence from Rio has been a small mercy, a fleeting reprieve from the chaos she's been stirring. For now, her absence feels like one less storm cloud looming over us, one less deranged force to contend with. Dean and I have reached a breaking point, though, and we've made up our minds. If Rio doesn't cease her relentless harassment, we're going to confront her face to face. We'll make it crystal clear that we're prepared to take legal action, press charges, if necessary, unless she backs off. We've tried reasoning with her through messages, but it's like shouting into a void. She doesn't take our warnings seriously. A text or a phone call clearly isn't enough to pierce through her obsession. Deep down, we both know what she's angling for. She's banking on pushing us to the edge, forcing us to engage with her just to demand she stop this unhinged behavior. And, in a twisted way, she's about to get her wish. We're done playing nice. We're planning to show up at her doorstep, likely this evening or tomorrow, though the exact timing is still up in the air. There's no script yet, but we'll lay it out plainly. Her actions, past and present, are not just cruel, they're borderline psychotic. We'll warn her that if she doesn't stop tormenting us, we'll have no choice but to report her for harassment. This has to happen in person. A direct confrontation is the only way to make her understand we're not bluffing. We've already sent her texts, explicitly cautioning her to stop, but she brushes them off like they're nothing. It's as if she's daring us to escalate, oblivious to the consequences she's inviting. We haven't gone as far as filing a police report or seeking a restraining order, though we've considered it. Honestly, Rio doesn't seem dangerous, just unhinged in a way that's more pathetic than threatening. Besides, with our honeymoon just around the corner, the last thing we need is the headache of legal proceedings. The paperwork, the court dates, the endless back and forth, it's too much to take on right now. A verbal warning feels like the simpler path, a way to shut this down without dragging ourselves through a bureaucratic nightmare. Still, I can't help but feel a pang of guilt for Dean. He's been gutted by all of this, and it breaks my heart to see him so shaken. Rio's vendetta was meant to wound me, to tear me down, but it's not working. I've made peace with who she is, a deeply flawed, spiteful person whose actions reflect her own brokenness. Her schemes don't touch me anymore. But Dean? He's caught in the crossfire, hurting because of the mother who claims to love him. It's heartbreaking to watch him grapple with her betrayal. Rio's fixation on me is baffling, rooted in some warped jealousy that Dean's love for me somehow eclipses what he feels for her. It's absurd, almost delusional, to think that harassing your daughter-in-law could win back your son's affection. Her behavior is beyond petty, it's pathological. I'm no psychologist, but I'd wager she needs professional help, maybe a full evaluation. This isn't just a family squabble, it's a disturbing pattern of obsession and manipulation. She's gone to such extremes, petty, vindictive acts meant to humiliate me, all because she can't handle the idea that Dean's loyalty lies with me. It's not just sad, it's grotesque. Her actions scream of someone who's lost touch with reality, someone who needs to confront her own demons before she drags everyone else down with her. What stings most is the toll this is taking on Dean. He doesn't deserve this. No one does, but especially not him, not when he's done nothing but try to keep the peace. Rio's fixation has turned her love for him into something toxic, a weapon she wields without care for who it hurts. I've tried to understand her, to find some shred of empathy for whatever pain drives her to act this way, but I'm running out of patience. Her hatred for me feels like a performance, a desperate bid for control in a dynamic she can't accept. And yet, all she's done is push Dean further away, alienating the very person she claims to cherish. It's tragic, in a way, but it's hard to feel sorry for someone so hell-bent on destruction. For now, we're bracing ourselves for the confrontation, hoping it'll be enough to put an end to this madness. If it isn't, we'll have to rethink our approach, because neither of us can live like this much longer. When we approached her doorstep, our intention wasn't to beg for entry or seek reconciliation. We were there to deliver a firm message. Her relentless harassment had crossed a line, and we were prepared to escalate matters to court if it continued. The words seemed to pierce through her composure, striking a raw nerve. In an instant, her demeanor shifted, and with a furious sweep, she threw the door open, her face flushed with indignation. What followed was a verbal onslaught, her voice sharp and laden with accusation, reverberating in the still air. She launched into us, claiming we had orchestrated a public spectacle at our wedding to shame her in front of our guests. Her narrative twisted reality, painting us as the aggressors who should fear legal repercussions. Her gaze locked onto mine, her eyes blazing with a personal vendetta, as she declared me the architect of this entire conflict. My relationship with her son, Dean, she insisted, had pushed her to take extreme measures. In a moment of unguarded candor, she confessed her failed plot. She had banked on Rio, her chosen instrument, to wreak havoc at our wedding, tarnishing our moment of joy. But Rio's ineffectiveness had caused her scheme to collapse, leaving her visibly enraged at its failure. The sheer venom in her tone was startling, a force that left both Dean and me momentarily stunned. We had long suspected her desire to sabotage our relationship, but to hear her admit it so openly was a gut punch. It was one thing to intuit her motives, it was another to confront the unfiltered truth of her intentions. Sandra's accusations grew more vicious as she labeled me a homewrecker, a charge so disconnected from reality that it bordered on absurd. Those familiar with our story would see through her distortions, recognizing the falsehoods she wielded like weapons. Turning her attention to Dean, she issued a scathing prediction. He would one day regret choosing me over her. She envisioned him, humbled and broken, returning to her for forgiveness. In a dramatic flourish, she proclaimed that her love as a mother would compel her to welcome him back, but until that day, she wanted no part of him. She couldn't stand to look at him. With a final, resounding slam of the door, she punctuated her tirade, sealing herself off from us. Sandra likely believed her words would wound Dean, that they would plant seeds of doubt or remorse. But she was mistaken. This confrontation was the liberation we had sought, a definitive end to her toxic presence in our lives. Her outburst, though intense, was the final act in a drama we were ready to leave behind. The notion of her intruding on our honeymoon, a fear once fueled by her obsessive behavior, now seemed like a distant specter we had finally banished. Her desire to supplant me, to unravel our union, had been laid bare, but it held no sway over us anymore. As we stood there, The echoes of her slammed door fading, a quiet relief settled over us. Sandra's rage had marked the end of her influence, freeing us to embrace our future. Dean's hand found mine, his grip steady and reassuring, a silent vow that we had emerged stronger. Her accusations, her failed schemes, and her bitter words dissolved into insignificance. We were done with her, ready to step into our new life together, unencumbered by her shadow. The door she slammed shut was, in truth, an opening to a future where her presence would no longer haunt us.